What if I told you there exists a piece of linen that may have wrapped the body of Jesus Christ himself? Not a painting, not a sculpture, but something that behaves like a photograph from 2,000 years ago. And yet, science says it shouldn't exist. So what is the Shroud of Turin? The story begins in the New Testament. In the Gospel of John, we read that the linen cloths used to bury Jesus were found lying in the empty tomb, with the face cloth folded separately. This detail matters. It tells us that Jesus was buried in linen, and that those cloths were left behind when the body was gone. For believers, this is where the mystery begins. When scientists began studying the shroud, they discovered something unusual. The image is not painted. It's not ink. It's not dye. It exists only on the outermost fibers of the linen. And even more striking, it behaves like a photographic negative. When the image is inverted, a human face appears with startling clarity. But that's not all. The image also contains what some researchers describe as three-dimensional information, where the brightness of the image corresponds to distance from the body. Almost like a physical imprint, captured in space. No known medieval technique fully explains this combination of properties. The man on the cloth also shows signs of extreme physical trauma. There are marks consistent with scourging across the body, wounds in the wrists and feet consistent with crucifixion, a wound in the side consistent with a spear. Even the patterns of blood flow appear consistent with gravity and clotting. These details closely align with the descriptions found in the Gospels, accounts of Jesus' suffering, crucifixion, and death. For many, the level of detail is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Some studies have suggested the presence of real human blood. Researchers have reported signals consistent with hemoglobin, as well as patterns that resemble clotting and serum separation. But this is where the debate intensifies, because not all scientists agree. Some argue these findings could be explained by contamination or chemical breakdown over time, so even here the evidence remains contested. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the shroud is not what we understand, but what we don't. Despite decades of analysis, no widely accepted explanation exists for how the image was formed. It is not consistent with painting, not consistent with heat or scorch marks, and not easily explained by known chemical processes. Some have proposed that a burst of energy may have created the image. Others suggest unknown reactions that occurred at the moment of death, but no theory has fully reproduced what we see on the cloth. The image remains unexplained. In 1988, radiocarbon dating placed the shroud in the medieval period, between 1260 and 1390. At first glance, this would seem to settle the question. But some researchers argue the sample used may have come from a repaired section of the cloth, potentially skewing the results. They also point to possible contamination from centuries of handling, fires, and restoration. Critics respond that multiple laboratories reached the same conclusion and that the dating remains reliable. So the debate continues. More recent DNA studies have found a mixture of genetic material on the shroud, human DNA, plant traces, and microbial contamination from multiple regions. Some interpret this as evidence of a long and complex history of handling and movement. But most scientists caution that the DNA is too degraded and contaminated to identify a single individual. So again, no definitive conclusion can be drawn. And so we are left with a paradox. A cloth that appears to show a crucified man, an image that defies easy explanation, and a story that closely mirrors one of the most significant events in human history. If the shroud is authentic, it would be one of the most important artifacts ever discovered. If it is not, it remains one of the most mysterious images ever created. Either way, the Shroud of Turin continues to challenge science, history, and belief. The question is not just what it is. The question is, what do you believe?